of the Boomtown Pod, your home for all combat sports. Breaking down everything from the UFC, Bellator, and PFL, all the way to boxing. This is your home for everything combat. Join your hosts, Andrew Kahn and Cole Smith, as they break down all the latest news, signings, and fight cards so you never miss a beat. This podcast sponsored by RKP Roofing in Regina. For all your roofing requirements, reach out to Randall and the crew for the ultimate roof and home experience. 306-580-9849. This podcast sponsored by FKN Beer, the funniest beer out there without a doubt. Delicious FKN Ale, and now the brand new Boom Lagers in store now. Grab yours off the shelf today and enjoy the best Canadian beer. Show the world your hustle with premium quality Rest When Dead apparel, designed for an aesthetic look. Visit them today at restonedead.ca. Sandman Boxing System and Blue Collar Media Group, partners and sponsors since day one. Now, here's your hosts, Andrew Kahn and Cole Smith. Season 3 is live now.
Our Season 3, Episode 8. It is flying by. I am your host, Andrew Kahn. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Boomtown Pod, your home for all things combat sports. Hope you guys are having a fantastic evening. I'm riding solo tonight, so bear with me. We're going to have a lot of fun on this one. There's a lot of stuff to get into. If you guys have any comments, if you want to reach out, this is a show where I'd love to be interactive with you guys. So let's get down to business. This podcast doesn't happen without the sponsors that you see down below. FKN Ale. What can I say? We've had a tremendous little go around with FKN Ale. We've gotten more merch. I mean, the merch just keeps flying in through FKN Ale. Like, it just doesn't end. So I've got a lot of giveaways with them coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about UFC 289. Of course, we're going to talk about Canada and UFC 290. It's going to be a lot of fun. But nonetheless, thank you to RKP Roofing also joining us on the podcast sponsorship this year. Those guys are awesome. If for all your home needs, you heard the, of course, big famous Don Andrews voice telling you what to do to get a hold of them, which is absolutely awesome. And of course, we couldn't do it without Rest When Dead clothing apparel. Check this out. I got to do some voice work for them for their latest commercial, actually, on Instagram, which you can actually check out, which is really, really cool. I haven't done a commercial since my radio days, which was, it took me back, made me feel super nostalgic, but nonetheless, restwhendead.ca. Man, this stuff is absolutely unbelievable. This is the Father Time collection, which is really, really cool. They were actually at SK Built Gym this past week, so I got the scoop to come and grab one for my boy Aaron, so shout out to him. And cool stuff that's going to be really, really cool. We're actually going to be interviewing Aaron and doing a workout at Hustle Culture Fitness tomorrow, and then we're going to have our great video editor, Mark, share that on our socials, so I cannot wait for that. Just a super, super talented dude, and Mark, shout out to him. Luke Ardo, thanks for tuning in, my man. Always appreciate the support. So let's get into this, shall we? This is the week that was, and it is sponsored by FKN Ale and FKN Boom. Kind of cool to have your own podcast beer. And shout out to FKN, who crushed it this week in Calgary. It was an unbelievable event for them. Kirk, the owner operator of the company, was actually giving me play-by-play updates of what was going on. Tons of photos, tons of people. They did really, really well, and apparently moved a ton of merch and a ton of merchandise. You have one of these beers, they're delicious. You can get them if you're in Saskatchewan, if you're in the Regina area, you can get it at the Ice House in White City. Go check it out. Or, of course, at Unnie Sobeys in Regina. Okay, let's get into it. Every week that I've been doing these fight cards and we've been breaking down the major ones, this is UFC 288. We're going to call this one the weird but it worked card. And what I mean by that, top to bottom, just a really, really odd card. Weird all around. Let's kick it off. The fight that started off the night that made me feel weird, okay? We had Kron Gracie making his return to the UFC for the first time in a very long time, taking on our boy, Charles Jourdain. Now, this fight was boring as shit. I don't know what was going on with Kron Gracie, and I know that Dana White even said it during the post-fight press conference. He said, I have no idea, legitimately, what Kron Gracie's game plan was. We haven't seen the guy in 2.5, 3 years. Comes back to the octagon. Terrible. It's just a terrible fight, and I feel bad for Charles Jourdain, who, of course, was our Canadian on the card, and props did more than Kron to stay in the fight, ultimately ended up winning the fight. But what the hell do you do with Kron Gracie now? The name Gracie is so legitimate with, of course, the UFC. Think about all the Gracies we've had. So crazy situation that we kicked off the card with that fight. I honestly pegged that fight to be one of the best fights on the card, and it was a stinker. It just fell flat. I mean, I hope Kron Gracie goes back to the drawing board after this layoff and figures out what he's supposed to do to be a better fighter. But for Jourdain, I mean, he just keeps moving up the ranks. So as a Canadian, I'm excited to see what's next for him, what his turnaround time is kind of like, and when we can see him again. He's a great fighter. He's a ton of fun. So it would be a very exciting matchup to happen. Now into the second fight of the night, Evloev versus Lopez. If you don't know and you didn't watch this card, you wouldn't realize that Lopez himself took this fight on 5 friggin' days' notice against a very good Evloev, who might be one of the better, people in that division. So Lopez comes in on 5 days. This is the coolest part. He ends up losing, had a couple of submission attempts. There was a couple times he was locked in deep on those submission attempts. I thought, okay, maybe he pulls up the upset. He was a plus 500 underdog. I like money. I like making weird bets. So why wouldn't I throw some money on that? But nonetheless, it ended up being a very, very weird fight. Lopez getting paid out by Dana White at the end of the fight for not only, basically the way that performance structures work out in the UFC, you get per win or even just showing. So he got paid to be there, and he got paid a bonus if he had won. That's awesome. Because, I mean, realistically, he took this fight on 5 days' notice. Dude, I ain't doing anything on 5 days' notice. You have to, inform me. If I'm going out, you have to let me know, 2 weeks ahead of time so I can at least plan around it. So the fact that he had 5 days to, make weight and show up and fight and put in a fucking great effort, Diego Lopez, folks, put himself on the map with this. Now, we've seen this in the past with fighters stepping up on very short notice. Obviously, Sean O'Malley had Krzysztof back in the day, and he performed well. It never really panned out, but I honestly see Diego Lopez having a successful future in the UFC. So I'm really excited to see what they potentially think of him, which is going to be sparks and fireworks. He's great. Third fight of the night. This was kind of like a title setup fight. Whoever was going to win this fight is going to face Weili Zhang. That's just the fight that was going to be made. Now, with that being said, Jessica Andrade, coming into this, has been on a tear, just killing people, knocking people out, looking like vintage Andrade, which is amazing. Her opponent, a very game Exonin, who is in, I don't want to say in the radar, right? She was making her way up the rankings, a couple great performances for her, a couple knockouts, a couple submissions. So it was great to see her climb up the ladder. Now, here's the crazy thing. Andrade looks like she's putting on the pressure. She drops her hands one time, chases Exonin, and gets belted and knocked completely out. So with that being said, now you've got this situation, if you're Dana White, which is, excuse me, which is just this miraculously unbelievable circumstance where Andrade now is out of the picture after beating, the likes of Thug Rose in the past. And now you've got, you can go to Japan or China and set up this card that they've been dreaming of and have a title fight. Exonin versus Weili Zhang. This is a perfect situation for Dana White, who even said during the press conference, the post-fight, that this is going to be the matchup that he wants to make for the championship. Dude, you've got two native girls who are proud, very proud of their heritage, who are going to go in there and go to war. Exonin and Weili Zhang. It's going to be an incredible fight. I am just waiting for the announcement to when or where that's going to take place. Obviously, again, China seems to be the focus for Dana White to go overseas. And if I know anything about Dana White, he's probably going to be a man of his word, and he's probably going to do it. They've been wanting to throw that card for a very, very long time. Now they've got their headlining fight, and that place is going to be packed. I'm guaranteeing 60 to 70,000 fight fans. It's going to be unreal. Let's get into the co-main event, shall we? All right, we had Gilbert Burns on a 2-week kind of, rest period, 3-week, I guess, taking on Belal Muhammad. And honest to God, man, props to Gilbert Burns, but something went terribly wrong with his shoulder. You could see very quickly, I don't know if it was a kick that maybe starched his arm or, whatever it was, but it put a little oomph, didn't like that too much on him. And he tried to dictate the pace as best as he possibly could, but Gilbert Burns wasn't 100%. I don't know if it's a short camp, if he was hurt in camp. I'm not sure of the circumstance, but I will say this. Belal Muhammad did what he had to do to prove that he deserves to be at least in the top 3 of this division. He was accurate. He knew what he was doing. He threw great leg kicks, inside, high, anything. He was very, very articulate with his striking, which was really, really amazing to see. And of course, Gilbert Burns did the best he could, but once they eliminated the right arm, essentially, he was trying to throw lefts and he wasn't connecting on anything. And, even Gilbert Burns said himself, like, it's going to be a tough go for me to try to climb back into this title ring. Now, we've seen this from Gilbert Burns before. He's been in the title picture. He fought Kamaru Usman. He lost. Belal Muhammad is now legitimately the top 3 in this division, which it's going to be hard to, see and see what Belal does. But what I saw on Saturday gave me optimism that he fits in perfectly with this division. Now, of course, he's going to be waiting the winner of Rocky Edwards and Colby Covington. Now, I don't know who potentially wins that fight. That's a very fucking tough call. But honestly, man, if Colby comes out, Belal versus Colby is a great fight. If Rocky comes out, Belal versus Rocky's an amazing fight. So us as fight fans, we're getting spoiled in the welterweight division. And then, Gilbert Burns, for all intents and purposes, now that we know kind of what happens, who says no to Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns too and makes that the number 1 contender fight? I honestly see it being an amazing fight. There's so many great matchups in the welterweight division. Shout out to our guy, Logan, Team Colby. Hey, man, I've been Team Colby since day 1. That is my guy. I will run and die with Colby Covington no matter who he is fighting. I've lost money and I've won money because of Colby Covington. But nonetheless, there's so many great matchups to make in the welterweight division. Now let's get into it. UFC 288, the headlining fight. Henry Cejudo coming off a 3-year layoff, training everybody, it seems, including the likes of John Jones, taking on Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain's been on a tear and is probably the most disrespected champion in the UFC. And it's not even close. The guy's won 9 fights in a row, which is now a record in the the bantamweight division. Insane to think about, actually. But Henry Cejudo is this monster that was staring him down in the eyes, who has been the bantamweight champ, who was also the featherweight champion, retired on top, Triple C, the man, right? Wrong. Aljamain Sterling proved it was a controversial decision. And now that I have had the chance to rewatch it, initially off the get-go, I thought Cejudo's takedown in the 5th was pretty big, pretty significant. But then I rewatched it and I scored it 3-2 for Aljamain. I think he picked the pace a little bit better. I think he dictated how the fight was going to go a lot more. And Henry looked like he'd been out of the cage for 3 years in those first couple of rounds. And that's not a slight to Henry Cejudo. You could be the best hockey player in the world. I know a lot of people use the analogy, you put on the skates, it's like you're riding a bike for the first time. It ain't fucking like that. It's not what it used to be. Everybody's evolved, right? Like, I always use the comparison that, again, hockey references, but if you literally put Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid in this era of hockey, Connor McDavid's probably still better. It's just times change, things evolve. And when Cejudo was on top, there was the likes of TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt. Those were the names that were at the top at the time. And now you think about it, even Dominic Cruz, they're not the names anymore, right? Things change. So for Henry Cejudo to come in and fight a very game Aljamain Sterling, I will give him a ton of props to, because Aljamain keeps evolving as a fighter. He is terrific when it comes to reading, sprawls or takedowns or anything like that. Even Cejudo did a fantastic job. There was times where Aljamain, he's such a big body in the bantamweight division that he just literally went on top and was like, not today, Satan. Like, this isn't going to happen. So, at the end of the day, we get a unanimous decision. We got 48-47 from one judge for Cejudo. We got 48-47. And I looked at my buddies and I said, I have no idea who the hell is going to win this fight. Now that I rewatch it, the right choice was made. Fast forward all this crazy shit where you get, the bantamweight title gets put. You got, and still, Aljamain Sterling's your champion. Out of nowhere, for the first time in a long time, besides like Brock Lesnar pushing Daniel Cormier, which was they were trying to hype up whatever the fuck that was supposed to be, and it just fell flat. Sean O'Malley comes into the ring wearing this Michael Jackson Beat It 1984 jacket. And I'm like, all right, Sugar Show's here. They're obviously going to promote the shit out of this. This is the fight that people have been wanting. Sugar Sean versus Aljamain Sterling seems like it's definitely going to be the next fight. But in all this chaos that's going on, Sugar takes his jacket off, and Merab Dvalishvili, who's in the corner for Aljamain, puts his jacket on, zips it up, and you couldn't see it because they were like hyping up Aljamain and Sugar. But on the cage side, this is the best part. Go watch this clip if you can. But on the fucking cage is literally Merab Dvalishvili doing a dance, and the crowd's going wild. All the meanwhile, he's wearing Sean's jacket. Like, that's thug level shit. I thought it was hilarious. And nonetheless, again, the UFC, that whole thing just fell flat. I mean, O'Malley was like, hey, when, and just kept repeating himself like 48 times, saying the same goddamn bullshit that we've heard him say for the last little while. And then you had Sterling saying, like, I'm going to beat you. This is my fight, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, this is chaotic. There's no structure to this. This isn't any fun. Give Sterling a mic. The thing I'll give Bellator a ton of credit with, that maybe the UFC should take into consideration, is that during the pandemic era of Bellator, they had a mic, right? They had a guy holding a mic, and he just went, there's one guy that would talk, and then they would go over to the next guy, and then it was just like, all right, let's hype the fight up this way. It's not two dudes just yelling over each other, and poor Joe Rogan's in there like this, trying to get all the information in that we can. And as folks that want this fight to happen, I want to hear the best trash talk possible. Now, I know that's what pre-fight press conferences are for. I totally understand. But in that moment, you had an opportunity to see so many fans, and it just fell flat for me. But nonetheless, like I said, we're going to get that bantamweight title fight. Sean O'Malley, Aljamain Sterling. It's going to be wild. I'm excited. I know there's a lot of folks that were, clamoring and talking to us on our socials, telling us that they're very excited too, and love it, because that's what the sport's all about. And there's been just some crazy stuff that's been happening. And again, all intents and purposes, it was like watching a bad WWE promo. And I love Dave Bautista, but you remember that whole, this is what you want? Whatever that bullshit was that he said with Triple H. I was just like, this is what I'm getting out of Sterling and O'Malley. But I'm excited for the fight. When they announce it, can't wait. All right, let's go into it. That's UFC 188 or 288. Sorry. Let's get into segment 2. This is a look into the future, and it is sponsored by Rest When Dead Clothing Apparel, restwhendead.ca, and of course, our good friends at RKP Roofing. If you missed the announcement, I'm actually heading off to the lovely city of Moose Jaw tomorrow, and I'm going to be doing some filming, a workout session with Aaron York as well, and then our great video editor, Mark Guerrero, is going to be doing some editing. We're going to have that on all of our socials. I can't wait for you guys to see it. Gonna be hype. All right, UFC 289, Vancouver, Nunes was supposed to be taking on Jessica Pena. That's not happening. Enter Irene Aldrina. This is the fight that I wanted. And now I'm pissed I didn't buy tickets for it, even though the card keeps continuing to get weaker and weaker and weaker. This is a shout out, or maybe a call out to Dana White. Why do us Canadians who've waited so long get jibbed on like one of the most like fight night cards ever? Right? We've been clamoring, we've been waiting, we've been patient. We've given you some great athletes, and you give us this. I mean, I'm not upset about it. Again, it's going to be a fight that people watch. Nunes probably wins this thing. Although Adrina, her hands are, and her wrestling is just nuts. Shout out Mexico. They're doing crazy things over in Mexico right now. Their camps, their fighters, oh man. It's like, remember when Brazil was just on top of the world? That's what it feels like with Mexican fighters right now. They're on top of the damn world, and we love it. But nonetheless, that is going to be the new fight that's going to be taking over for UFC 289. That's a headlining fight. Nunes and Aldrina, Vancouver. I know some friends that are going to be going. I'm not really set on the card. I think it's so watered down and so weak for what could have been. And then you see the UFC. I know it's fight week, and international fight week is always the biggest thing. But like, God, they announced 290 today, and every fight on that is fire. I mean, the fact that Robbie Lawler is going to be the prelim main event taking on Nico Price, which in itself is a phenomenal fight. It's Robbie Lawler's retirement fight. So I'm just like, yo, give us something along those lines. We don't even, like, all intents and purposes, it's not that great of a card in Canada as compared to 190 or 290 that just got announced. So, geez Louise, we'll get into that another day when I have Cole here and we can go back and forth on this. But this weekend, UFC Fight Night, of course, we got Rozenstruik taking on Mr. Almeida. This is a battle of the heavyweights, boys. That's some big old meat just going around here. Rozenstruik is one of my favorite fighters in the heavyweight division. Almeida is also a great fighter in his own. So if I'm going to go with any picks, I don't really see any draft odds or bet odds. I think today I saw that Rozenstruik was a pretty heavy favorite, about 250. I don't know if I'm riding with that. Who knows with Rozenstruik? Sometimes you get an unbelievable performance where you're like, there's that knockout power that I've been waiting to see for so goddamn long. And then it just kind of disappears and falls flat. But getting into some other news. Today, or actually yesterday, was the Diaz and Paul press conference. The only word I have for this press conference, excuse me, I've been fighting some allergies and cold, but the only word I have for this whole segment was just whack. Like, no fans, which was really bananas and weird. I couldn't figure that one out. The other thing that really, really upset me with this whole thing, with the Diaz and Paul press conference, is that we found out some really weird stipulations. Now, Jake Paul does things in his favor. There's no doubt about it. We've seen it before. We're seeing it again. According to the Texas Commission, Nate Diaz is going to be tested at random for marijuana. That's like me eating food. Like, I'm 231 pounds for a reason. Nate Diaz smokes a ton of ganja. So the fact that he's going to be tested for this tells me right off the get-go, some odd stipulation was put into place with this, because I'm baffled. Like, I'm literally mind blown that was one of the things. Even Nate himself, when they were announcing the stipulations of the fight, they're like, yeah, we're actually going to be doing marijuana drug testing, and you can't be in the influence of it. And I just was like, Nate, first and foremost, was like, wait a minute, the UFC just legalized marijuana. But this ain't the UFC, I guess. So that tells me the Pauls are up to some kind of weird shit with this, because there's no way, and this is, again, there's so much hype with this fight. We want to see it. I love Nate Stockton, baby. People love Jake Paul. They want to see this fight. Everybody, I think, really wants to realistically see this fight. Here's my issue. Here's the big issue. No fans at the press conference was fucking weird. Like, even Nate said that. He's like, I'm used to having like at least 1,000 people at every one of my press conferences. There was not a single soul that was there at the press conference besides media. Nate hates media. The dude literally halfway through the set walked off during the press conference, took a piss, came back. Like, that's not Nate Diaz. His thing is he can sell fights, bro. Like, that's his thing. If you don't put anybody in front of him, I don't think this card's going to do well. Like, I know that there's going to be some of us that watch this fight, and we're all going to be intrigued, and it's Nate Diaz, it's Jake Paul, two polarizing figures, but it's just so weird the way they did it, and I feel bad. Honestly, Ariel Helwani is one of my faves, and I will give props and love to Ariel Helwani, my fellow Canadian who now resides not in Canada, but he was given the responsibility of being the middleman between the two guys, and it was just like, how do you get hyped up for that? He's like, thanks, Jake, and thanks, Mr. Diaz, and just, I don't know, bananas. It's fucking weird. And again, the fight stipulations seem that it's going to be favoring Jake again, and we've been down this road. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me ranting, but you guys are tuning in, and I'd love to hear from you and what you guys revolve around that. Now, of course, we had another fighter. Our boy Canelo was fighting this past weekend. A performance where he won. No slouch, not taking away anything from Mr. Canelo. Damn, he looked beatable. And that's the first time I've ever been able to say that, besides his legendary fights with Triple G. Canelo just looked flat, would be the term that I use. It wasn't his best showing. He looked very beatable in that fight. I don't know if it's the layoff. It's, he's been doing a ton of like other shit on the side. But Canelo didn't look great. And I think if I'm a boxing fan, I really hope that he turns it around and gets back to peak Canelo, because, I mean, Canelo is a freak, man. When he's on, he's probably top 5 greatest boxers in the world. But again, this weekend, he looked super beatable, and he almost did lose that fight. Like, there's a lot of people who have been reaching out to me and like, did Canelo win that? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I mean, it was a tight fight. And I do think they made the right decision. Canelo obviously capturing and retaining his title, which is huge. So with that being said, it's not a very long podcast. I'm riding solo. Usually there's some back and forth banter. Here's what I'm going to do for you folks. I've got a lovely t-shirt that I had just held in my hands. I have a red FKN shirt. Like this, watch this, comment on it throughout the week. And on Saturday, I'm going to be making an announcement who is going to go home with this FKN Ale shirt. Thanks to the great folks at FKN Ale. It is summertime. Sun's out, guns out. Here we go. You want some t-shirts? I got it for you. So again, make sure to like, comment, anything on this post, and your name will be entered into the random wheel. Dylan Haduk actually won the last one. He actually dropped by, came and picked it up. Guys, dope. Thank you for tuning in, Dylan. We really, really appreciate your support and the love. Now, again, all you guys have to do, simple. Comment, like, whatever you want during this week. That is going to be up for grabs. Again, once again, if you missed it, the lovely FKN Ale red t-shirt still in the bag. They keep sending me stuff. I'm going to keep giving it to you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, I am your host, Andrew Cohn. You guys can find us anywhere on our socials. Of course, we got the Boomtown Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can follow us on bluecollarmg.com. Stream us on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts. 10,000 downloads before season 3 started. So thank you guys so much for your support for the past 3 years. We are continuing to build the empire. That is the Boomtown Pod. All things combat sports. For myself and Cole Smith, who couldn't be here today, and we had our special guest that was supposed to be here, Justin Pyatt, wasn't able to make it, some technical issues. I said, you know what? I can't let the folks down. We got to recap some stuff. So thank you for tuning in. A very short, quick, brief episode this week. We will be back to break down everything as it happens. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Boomtown Pod, your home for all things combat sports.